Monday, May 1st. We have one study session topic in store for us tonight. We have Director of Community Development Brad Power here to introduce the representatives from CHFA, and they will present to. They are here to present and provide an overview of the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. Good evening, Director.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you. Indeed, as a follow-up to a council request that was fulfilled for you in late March relative to the locations of CHFA-funded properties within Englewood, we thought it'd be beneficial for the council to maybe learn a little bit more about the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program that's administered by CHFA, and as well as their organization in general. So I hope they have joined us online. I'd like to introduce Catherine Groskup, who is the tax credit manager with the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, as well as Chris Linton, who is the multifamily compliance manager. And if you all have joined us throughout your presentation, if you would just say next slide, I will drive the slideshow from here. So with that, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
All right, well, thank you. Can I have confirmation that you can hear me all right? This is Catherine.
We can hear you, Catherine. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Well, good evening, and thank you again for the opportunity to be with you and share a little information about both CHFA, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. I do not see the slides, so I just, I have a copy here, but I want to be transparent that I can't see maybe what are the slides being displayed. There we go. Thank you so much. So I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Chris Linton, who is our manager of program compliance. So I'll start these slides, and then we'll go there, and then we're certainly happy to be available for any questions from you at council. So with that, please go to the next slide, and just a little bit about CHFA. CHFA is not a state agency, so we've been around for 49 years through authorization from the state legislature to carry forward the mission of strengthening Colorado and investing in affordable housing and community development. We are directed by an 11-member board, and then in the 80s, 82, we received authority to also use bond proceeds to support economic development. So we have three primary arms of business: single family work, multifamily work, and business finance work. And to date, we've been able to approximately raise and invest about $32.5 billion across Colorado. Next slide, please. We have a mission, as I mentioned, to strengthen Colorado by investing in affordable housing and community development, so both. And we have that vision that everyone in Colorado will have the opportunity for housing stability and economic prosperity. And with that, I'd like to sort of dive into what we like to talk about at the beginning, which is a housing continuum. All communities in our state and across our country, and even globally, have members across a housing continuum. So if you look at this spectrum, on the left side would be members of community who generally would have very low income or potentially no income, all the way to the right side where we're talking about members who may be in ownership situations with much higher incomes. And there are different responses, both by structure type and opportunity for different members in communities across this housing continuum. And tonight we're really going to be focusing on maybe that lighter green in the middle, affordable rental housing, as I described the housing tax credit program. So with that, creating affordable housing really demands either one or two things in some cases, but it requires either an asset subsidy or an income subsidy. And generally rental vouchers are the primary income subsidy. You hear of housing choice vouchers, sometimes Section 8 vouchers. And on the asset side, asset subsidies include tax credits, which I will be talking about, gap funding resources, land donations, and other public funding. And in fact, there's quite a lot of resource on the asset side that has been created in Colorado in the last few years. If we look at, next slide, please, that asset gap, that borrowing capacity challenge, this is meant to sort of be side by side a market rate and a affordable development with identical cost to construct and different rents that are being charged essentially. So in the blue on the left is the market example, and the right is the green affordable, where let's say this was a 90 unit, all 2-bedroom rental development charging approximately $1,100 per rent per unit. That would command essentially effective gross income after 12 months of just about $1.5 million. And then moving down project expenses, the operating costs for this development in my example might include property management staff, utility costs, insurance, property taxes, etc. And those are fixed generally per year, $355,000 in this example. And so that NOI, that net operating income, the gross rent minus the expenses, that NOI in this example is about $1.1 million. And all financing institutions, including CHFA, have the requirement for some coverage if we are to do lending. And so that is called debt service coverage. And generally it's typical to see a little cushion, maybe 20 cents on the dollar, to cover debt service, which walks here toward a maximum loan value of about 14 million or 13.8 million, or a loan to value of 77%. So I'm illustrating there sort of the stand-up of a market development. If we are talking about affordable housing, we need to flip the script, or we need to look at that asset gap. So in the green column, affordable, I've reduced the rents from that market rate amount to, let's say, by half. So a $600 rent for my 90 units approximately. And that, you know, the effective gross income after a year with a little bit of vacancy, maybe a 7% vacancy cushion, is approximately $675,000. Same expenses. I still have the staff, the utilities, other insurance costs. So what you really see the impact then is in the NOI, net operating income, where it's drastically reduced to just about $250,000. Same debt service coverage, but my loan value now is dramatically impacted and reduced to about $3 million. And so I have a loan to value of 17%, and I have a gap. I have a challenge that needs to be filled in some way to create affordable housing. So if we go to the next slide, one of the most, in fact, the most successful program in the United States was created in '86, and that is the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It was created to respond to that asset gap, and it is a public-private partnership model. There are two types of housing tax credits, the 9%, you'll hear that, or the 4% credit. The 9% housing tax credit was designed to sort of be a 70% present value credit, or to fill about 70% of the capital cost, the capital stack needs of a development. It is a competitive credit that has a population-based allocation in Colorado. We have about 16 million in annual 9% credit each year. It offers very deep subsidy, as I said, and it is awarded once a year in our round one. So we expect to be making 9% awards toward the end of May. The 4% credit is a 30% present value credit, a much shallower subsidy. It is a must finance with requirement of private activity bonds, the issuance of tax exempt debt. And we pair that credit also with Colorado's state affordable housing tax credits. We use the 4% program to really leverage that opportunity for state affordable housing tax credits. So if we look at the next slide, kind of comparing these across 4 columns, I sort of illustrate it very quickly tonight. The conventional model, where we do have some debt financing and maybe some owner equity, charging and creating a market rate development in communities. Next column over, a 4%, a little bit shallower than the other, but at 30%, 34% being filled by tax credit equity and still some debt financing, but here private activity bond, tax exempt finance debt. Moving to that third column, I am pairing now my 4% credit with state affordable housing tax credits, AHTEC, in that acronym, which is represented in the yellow in that bar. And that just is the opportunity to do more resource to be able to offer and drive rents lower And then finally, the 9% housing tax credit, which has the greatest amount of subsidy available, reducing the amount of debt and allowing the opportunity to have very low rents. So in wrapping up, this program, next slide, please, works with a complicated and sort of a flow process. So CHFA, our role is to allocate housing tax credits to developers in the green. Developers apply for these competitive resources each year, and we communicate to developers and other stakeholders through our qualified allocation plan the way to apply for credits and the competitive factors for award. Developers in turn strike a partnership with investors in the purple who are interested in that offset of federal tax credits, in some cases state tax liability, in order to support the proposed development with equity, with resource. And in the federal program, the tax credit is for 10 years. So it is a tax liability of, in Colorado's case, no more than $1,450,000 each year for 10 years. And that is governed by the IRS. So it's an IRS program at the heart. So then, next slide, just in summary, this program works partly because the developer, it's a partnership. The developer manages that project, often drives the construction of the project or the rehab, and guarantees that long-term affordability, in many cases 40 years and even longer. Competitiveness through the response we have in Colorado and through our work with the QAP really generates strong projects that respond to local needs. The private sector here is really assuming a lot of the risk for project success in order to receive those credits and other financial benefits. And then that ability of each state to customize the program through the qualified allocation plan allows all of this to work very successfully. And to date in Colorado, we've been able to support through new construction or rehabilitation over 76,000 low-income housing tax credits statewide. So with that, I want to turn it over to Chris Linton, and he'll carry us forward about how it works on the compliance aspect. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. And maybe a quick sound check for me as well before I dive in. Am I coming through?
We can hear you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us again. And again, my name is Chris Linton. I'm our manager of program compliance here at CHFA. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about the compliance side of things from the programmatic view for the low-income housing tax credit program. If we could go to the next slide, please. So our program compliance team monitors for compliance with both federal level regulations as well as any state specific requirements that Catherine just referenced in our qualified allocation plan. We monitor for both levels of compliance there, and I'll give a few examples of those in a moment. The who of compliance really is ultimately the responsibility of the owner of the property. They're the ones responsible for maintaining compliance with the various program requirements. However, in most cases, CHFA is interfacing with a third-party property management company that owner has contracted with to handle the day-to-day property management and compliance duties. So that's our main partner in our compliance work. Our compliance monitoring begins as soon as a building places in service. So just think about a brand new building that's finished being constructed. The doors are open, tenants are starting to move in. That's when the compliance monitoring process really begins and goes throughout the term of the regulatory agreements that we have in place. And that's typically a 30-year period, but sometimes can be longer. And lastly, the why of compliance may be self-evident, but we really consider the compliance monitoring to be a valuable process to ensure that the resource we have allocated to the property is being delivered as intended, and that the physical asset is maintained for the long term for the community and for the residents. Next slide, please. So just a few of the activities that our compliance team undertakes in fulfilling that task and responsibility. CHFA conducts periodic audits and inspections of tax credit funded properties to ensure that the correct resident population is being housed. and that the buildings are being physically maintained in a decent condition. These audits and inspections generally occur once every 3 years and include a random sample, tenant files, and tenant units to inspect and review. In order to be really a partner to our property management and ownership, we help support our portfolio being compliant and maintaining that compliance through providing formal training and technical assistance. That can be both in group settings or one-on-one, depending on the setting there. But we really view our role as not just being that monitoring arm, but also being a partner to our portfolio to help them be successful in what ultimately is our common and mutual goal of, again, maintaining that asset for the long term and providing that quality housing. Ultimately, if there are instances of non-compliance, it's our compliance team's duty to report that non-compliance to the IRS when applicable, and work with our legal team here at CHFA to go down any enforcement actions. Fortunately, that's incredibly rare, and it's very uncommon that we have to go that route. But we also do receive resident inquiries or complaints through a dedicated resident hotline that we maintain that's available for residents of CHFA-funded properties to voice any complaints they may have for their tenancy. CHFA does not assist residents in certain situations such as evictions or other legal matters, any discrimination complaints, but we can be of assistance to residents who may be having more programmatic issues or questions, such as their eligibility for the program being determined, or perhaps maintenance issues in their units that are not being addressed in a timely manner. And then ultimately, that last bullet point, our compliance team provides feedback on our experience in monitoring for specific owners and property managers. If they're now applying for new tax credits on a new property, we provide that feedback to the underwriting team, Catherine and her team, to ensure that that component of the underwriting is fully considered. And next slide, please. And so here is just a very basic example of how the gross rents in the low-income housing tax credit program operate. So you see here just a little table here that demonstrates that the gross rent is not just the actual rent that the tenant is paying to the landlord each month. It's also inclusive of a utility allowance that estimates any tenant-paid utilities, as well as any non-optional fees that the landlord may be assessing to the tenants. So in this particular example, you'll see that the rent the tenant is paying is $995. There's a utility allowance that's estimating the tenant paid utilities in that unit at $50 per month. And then in this scenario, the landlord is assessing a non-optional water fee to all households at $25 per month. And so we add those three components together to get a gross rent of $1,070. And to maintain compliance with the program regulations, the property must have that gross rent figure. So the rent plus any non-optional fees plus the utility allowance, that must be under the maximum housing tax credit rent that is published each year by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. They publish those figures each year, and ultimately those are what the tax credit properties are subject to complying with. As stated, those are published annually. The owner of each property then determines what their rent will be, so long as it's under the maximum rent that's published for the applicable AMI designation and unit size. So ultimately, that landlord is not necessarily having to charge the maximum rent. That's the ceiling for the rents. They may charge something at or below that ceiling. Next slide, please. I believe that concludes our presentation, and thank you for your attention. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Grosskopf, Mr. Lin, thank you very much for the presentation tonight. I believe Mr. Woodward has the first question. Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Question for you on your the prior slide, the gross rent example. I'm curious on the utilities. As an example, this past winter, where utilities doubled in some cases or more. How is that handled?
Yes, I'll take that question. Great question. You're right. It gets to be quite a complex thing to estimate, as you can imagine. And so there are a few different methodologies that properties can select from to make that estimation, and they are required to periodically review those utility allowances to ensure that they are, in line with the actual costs that residents are seeing. But there are a total of 4 different methodologies that are available for properties to utilize in estimating those utility costs. So to answer your question, they are updated periodically with that intent of reflecting actual costs that residents are seeing.
And does the tenant pay the utilities, it says allowance, to the landlord, or are they paying the utility direct to the utility?
The utility allowance is only for those utilities that a tenant is themselves responsible for paying directly to the utility provider. So think about an instance where that tenant is paying their electric bill directly to the electric provider. That's when there would be a utility allowance included to estimate that cost burden by the household. There are situations where a landlord may include all utilities within the rent. That's not very common, but just to illustrate how that would work, there would be a $0 utility allowance in that situation because the tenant themselves would not be paying any utilities directly to a utility provider.
So I would guess in a multifamily, most times water fee would not be a part of their bill. I mean, it would be
It's not
as CAM or whatever.
Yes, it's not very common that we see a water sewer trash fee. It can happen, but it's certainly the exception.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And mine is property specific, and so I don't know if you can answer these questions. Has Traditions been evaluated for compliance over the last 3 or 4 years?
I don't have a specific date in front of me, council member, but as I stated, we do monitor properties typically every 3 years in the first 15 years of the tax credit program. So it's likely, I'm not sure where Traditions is in their program timeframe, but it is likely that we have reviewed them in the last 3 years or so.
Okay, I mean, I don't remember for sure. They may have been around for at least 6 years, but and when a property is labeled like 60% AMI, I think that Traditions may be 60% AMI. Do you know the answer to that question?
I believe that was in the meeting materials, so I can quickly reference that here. Yes, all their units are at the 60% AMI level.
So if a tenant is required to have 60% income, but in Arapahoe County, the prices for a 1-bedroom apartment can be fairly high, which is probably more than a 60% AMI income can pay for. Does CHFA take that into consideration?
Thank you for the question. I may invite Catherine to help answer this as well, but essentially the 60% AMI income limit is a maximum income that household can earn in order to qualify to reside in that unit. So their income can be at or below that maximum income limit. And then the rent for that unit is directly based on that AMI level. So it's intended to be a reflection of what's affordable to someone at that AMI level. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, that's very well said, Chris. And the only other thought would be that the affordability in this program is measured as a 30% standard. So it's 30% of that imputed income as what then drives the appropriate rent or the affordable rent determined in the program for that AMI and that household size.
Okay, so I know that in traditions, and there have been a couple people that have come to speak to city council, they do not qualify for housing vouchers. And so their rent was just, I think one of them said their rent was raised to, I want to say $1,400 a month. And that takes at least 80% of the income they are making.
Member Russell, was there a question there or just trying to understand that process?
Yeah,
or-
well, yeah, I'm trying to understand the process, because I think people are being priced out of traditions, even though it is supposedly affordable.
Is there a response, Mr. Leonard or Ms. Grosskopf, regarding that instance?
I'm not sure, other than to reiterate that those income limits and rent limits are published annually by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. So those are not figures that we at CHFA calculate and determine. They're published by the federal government, and then we then issue those for the state of Colorado. So our properties know what those figures are to follow for the year. So those figures do change annually. So if there is a resident who has been residing in their unit for a number of years and their income has remained relatively flat, but the rents have that ability to potentially be increased from year to year, there could be that situation where that unit becomes unaffordable to that particular resident.
Okay, so when you check for compliance, it's only to make sure they're not charging over what the allowable rent is, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Member Nuenkamp.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Ms. Grosskopf, you mentioned that there's quite a competitive process for the tax credits. Can you help us frame how many credits there are available for developers who want to build affordable housing compared to the demand?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question, and it does change each year, but over the last decade, it's been approximately just below a 3-to-1 oversubscription rate for the 9% program, and just over a 2%, a 2-to-1 oversubscription rate for our second round, which is the pairing of the 4% and state affordable housing tax credit. So essentially, it's a very risky endeavor. We ask for a certain amount of feasibility and due diligence with each application. So there is an upfront cost to be able to apply for housing tax credits with that risk of non-award at greater than 2-to-1, and in some cases more toward a 3-to-1 risk. In this current round, for example, so we are right in the middle of our 9% round one for 2023. There are 26 applications with a request of just over 36 million in annual 9% housing tax credits. And at this time, we're not at the final amount yet, but it would be a little bit, maybe 15.5 to 16 million in housing tax credits available to award. So we will be only able to award fewer than close to 1 in 3.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my question is somewhat similar in vein to Member Russell's. And when I look at the income limits, the chart for 60% AMI, the rents that we're charging at that AMI look remarkably similar to what market rate is. So the question then becomes, why is 60% the target, and what is the benefit of providing tax credits to a property that's going to charge something that's so close to market rate?
Well, maybe I will start, Chris, and then you can chime in. So I think your question, Mayor Pro Tem, was about the benefit of housing tax credits at the 60% AMI affordability. And if we had more time, one thing I wish I could explain is a very significant change in this program about 4 years ago, which allows for averaging of income. So we call that average income. But prior to that legislative action, the options for utilizing this resource were to elect to generally serve no greater than 60%. So the opportunity for that is that rents would be restricted across the affordability timeframe of the project. So generally 30, sometimes 40 years. And they escalate generally in our underwriting pro formas at no more than 2% annually. And 60% AMI rents across Colorado in the last at least maybe 5 to 6 years have definitely been below market, but there have been times in our history where 60% AMI can be closer to a market rate rent. So there is an inherent risk in some cases that we underwrite and are careful about in thinking of the award for credits across that life cycle of the pro forma. And then Chris, maybe you would have anything else to add.
I think I do. You summed it up nicely. Thanks, Catherine.
Mayor Pro Tem, any further questions?
I think the part that didn't quite get addressed was why the 60%? Is that just because that's the minimum to qualify for the federal tax credit, or is there some reason we target 60 instead of something, 30 or 40 or 50 range?
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying your question. I appreciate that. Maybe if I could bring you back to one of the slides where I was illustrating sort of the gross rent down in the NOI. So it was maybe early in my slide deck there. And really the challenge then is that debt financing challenge, the asset gap, where you have to charge enough rents to cover your expenses and really create financial feasibility by maximizing the debt that can be achieved at 60% versus what the credit will bring. And since it is a shallow or subsidy, so if we're looking at the second column over, it really can't grow beyond, in this model, about 34%. That is the 30% present value credit. So it isn't that it's very easy unless you're competing for even more competitive credits to be able to bring those rents to lower MIs.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, a couple of questions for me before I go to Member Woodward. But Mr. Lynn, I believe you stated that you were unaware of any inquiries into traditions here in Englewood, but I did send it. I think I heard that earlier. I may have misheard, but I did send a letter back on March 9th to just look in or to just investigate the rents at that at Traditions, just because we did receive citizen feedback at that point that they may not be in compliance. Just wanted to see if you did receive my letter and if anything was done from it.
Did receive email inquiry, I believe, from your staff, and we did review for each of the properties in the city of Englewood, which we do as a matter of practice for all the tax credit properties across the state, really on an annual basis. I know I mentioned earlier an every 3-year audit that we do for each property, but on top of that, or in addition to that, each year, every tax credit property is required to provide certain data to CHFA and report on the rents that they're charging, as well as some other occupancy and demographic data that's required reporting as a part of the program. And so it was with that data that we were provided as of 12/31 of last year, the most recent data available, that when we received your inquiry, we went back and ensured that the rents at the tax credit properties in the city of Englewood were not reporting any rents over the maximum program allowable rents. So yes, we did complete that review, and I believe provided that information back to your staff.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Linton. My second question is, when you talk about what is compliance, I'm kind of curious, is maintenance of the building or maintenance inside the building, is that considered part of the compliance review as well?
Yes, it is a key component of it.
And then I guess the last question, I think this may be a question for both of you. I know early on there's a slide here that talks about the housing continuum, right? And so there's the below 30% AMI, affordable housing 30 to 80% AMI. A lot of the conversation today has just been around affordable, so it leads me to believe we're only talking about the 30 to 80% AMI, but does CHFA also manage the middle income rental housing of 80 to 120% if there was properties that we're looking to build in that area, or even the first time long-term home ownership, which I was really surprised by how low that it goes down to 50% AMI. But does CHFA also get involved with basically reviewing and just verifying that they fit those income levels?
Maybe I'll try to provide an answer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it. It's a very good question, and I'll do my best here. Those are a descriptor. The housing continuum is really to describe both the tenure and built environment in communities and the income spectrum that exists in all communities. The low-income housing tax credit program is a formal program, as we've been talking about, through Treasury, the IRS. And it really has that targeting of that 80 to below AMI affordability range. CHFA does finance quite a bit of first-time and moderate single-family mortgage work. So we do have many programs that support first-time and moderate home buyers in communities. Those do not have any formal restriction in terms of monitoring. That's work that we do to really try to benefit people within the housing continuum toward that opportunity to achieve homeownership. And then you did ask about middle income rental housing, and we do at CHFA have a program that does finance middle income rental housing. And if we do have that opportunity to finance those types of developments, then we would be involved in ensuring the compliance there. But those are programs that have been created in some cases by CHFA directly with our own resources, and then just recently a program authorized through the state legislature that is just about ready to launch, that would be a more formal middle income rental development support program.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grossup. Member Woodward.
Thank you. Question on lease terms. Do the lease term, are they maximum of 1 year? So every year this is being readjusted?
Yeah, I can take that question. Thank you, Council Member. The tax credit program regulations stipulate a minimum lease term of 6 months. I'm not aware that there's a maximum lease term that's stipulated in the program. So a lot of the lease agreement questions ultimately boil down to state or local law, which CHFA wouldn't play a role in monitoring for that compliance. So really from the programmatic view, we look to ensure that that initial lease term is at least 6 months or longer. And after that initial lease term, the lease can go month to month, or it can be renewed at a 6 month or 1 year period after that initial term.
Okay. Can it be beyond 1 year?
I believe it can. I would have to research and confirm that for you. I'm not aware of an instance where I have personally seen that, but I'd be happy to research that and get a firm answer for you.
Okay. I would imagine or guess that if somebody desired a 3-year lease term, they would be subject to adjustments in rental annually or whenever, when the adjustment is done typically. Would that be correct? I mean, you're not going to be able to lock in a number for a 3-year period, are you?
If I understand the question correctly, rent increases, yes, are typically applied at lease renewal. So in a scenario where the lease agreement is 3 years, again, I have not seen that myself. Maybe for that reason you're saying, the rent would not be able to be increased until the time of renewal for that lease agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you. So if a property went to month lease, would there be any protection for the tenant that they're not going to raise the rent monthly?
Yes, and I believe that goes back to my statement about state and local laws regarding increased protections. I believe it was last year or perhaps 2 years ago now that the state legislature passed legislation regarding the timing and frequency of rent increases. I cannot quote that legislation specifically here, but there are protections just saying in general that landlords cannot increase rents more than a certain number of times per year, I believe was the legislation. Catherine, can you speak to that specifically?
I can't speak to that legislation, but I just want to again call out, as you've been explaining, that the maximum rent issued annually by Chris's team and department cannot be exceeded in any case in a compliant building situation.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any further questions from members of council? I don't see any further questions. Ms. Grosskopf, Mr. Lynn, thank you very much for the information tonight. Thank you for the presentation and your time, and very informative our end. So hope you have a great evening.
Thanks to you all. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and take a short break. We'll regroup here at the top of the hour. So it gives us about 18 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Can I help you? Or you got it? I got it. All right. Haven't seen you to say congratulations on being chairperson. Thank you. I kind of stumbled it. Yeah, but well, you'll be great. Well, so I'll be there next week. Yes.
Test, test. Test, 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 test.
Members of council, if you could please be seated. All right, thank you, everyone. We are now back. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, if you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. City Clerk, if you could please take roll call.
All right, good evening. Member Anderson,
Present.
Member Noonenkamp,
Present.
Member Russell,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Present.
Member Wink, Member Woodward,
Present.
Mayor Sierra.
Present.
Oh, 6 members present and 1 absent, and 1 absent is Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, this is minutes of the regular city council meeting of April 17, 2023. Any corrections? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from April 17th? Thank you, Member Woodward. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Can we please vote?
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward.
Aye.
Member Woodward. Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6, we have 2 appointments, communications, proclamations, recognition. We have 2 here tonight, and I'll go ahead and read them both. First up is the Proclamation for Public Service Week. Whereas Americans are served every day by public servants at the federal, state, county, and city levels who supply continuity to our democratic society, and whereas public employees and community volunteers serve in areas such as health, education, public arts, public safety, the arts, the environment, finance, infrastructure, human resources, community planning, recreation, and more. Whereas many public servants, including military personnel, first responders, healthcare workers, and others risk their lives every day in service to the people of the United States. Whereas the over 700 full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees of the city of Englewood are committed to exhibiting the highest standards of professional excellence, creativity, skill, and customer service. And whereas the dedicated elected officials, board and commission members, and volunteers play roles in developing, analyzing, and advising on policy, and are integral to the advancement of the quality of life enjoyed by citizens of Englewood. And now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Othaniel Sierra, Mayor of the City of Englewood, and the City Council hereby proclaim Public Service Recognition Week as the first week of May in the City of Englewood, and urge all citizens to appreciate the contributions of those who choose public service. Thank you for that. And then I'll move on now to the proclamation for National Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is observed in May to celebrate and pay tribute to the contributions of Asian Pacific Americans to American history, society, and culture. And whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month originated as a congressional bill in June of 1977, on March 28, 1979, President Carter issued Presidential Proclamation 4650, proclaiming the week beginning on May 4, 1979 as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. And whereas on May 1st, 2009, President Obama issued Presidential Proclamation 8369, proclaiming May 2009 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islander men and women are leaders in all aspects of American life, such as government, science, medicine, industry, military service, the arts, education, and sports. And whereas we recognize the significant contributions, accomplishments, and leadership of generations of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to our country, the state of Colorado, and the city of Englewood, as we continue to work to create a more supportive, inclusive, and equitable community that fully embraces all individuals of Asian descent. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Othaniel Sierra, Mayor of the City of Englewood, and the City Council hereby proclaim May 2023 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the city of Englewood. Thank you very much to our DEI committee as well as everyone for putting these proclamations together, so thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, we have recognition of scheduled public comment. The deadline to sign up to speak for scheduled public comment is Wednesday by 5 p.m. prior to the meeting through the city clerk's office. This is an opportunity for the public to address city council. There is an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner. Council may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue. Please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. And I still do ask that members of the public, we will be obviously taking public comment. We want to make sure that you stay respectful during this time. If there are any outbursts outside of your 5 minutes, I may ask you to be removed from city council chambers. So with that, I'll go ahead and go to the first speaker. It's Marcy Brown, an Englewood resident here to address council. Good evening, Ms. Brown. If you could just state your name and your address or your cross streets.
My name is Marcy Brown, Cornell and Sherman. And I would like to start off by saying I received this in the mail. It's a flyer. And what it says on here is that they want to buy my house, right? They're developers. They're called Buckley Team. And they want to scrape my house, which would be affordable for a regular family. And right, this council is all about affordability. So what they want to do is buy my house, and then they put a glossy finish in front where it's a duplex. So they're going to scrape my house, build a duplex, and for each side, they will be asking $1,139,000. So can you see how this does not make sense with your affordability plan? Honestly, common sense tells you that developers want to scrape my house to buy it. So you're looking at the bulk plane. And I've spoken to a few of you, and you haven't said anything about doing anything with the bulk plane. And darn it, I want it back to 12 feet. I'm tired of my neighborhoods being busted up by these developers. I have 2 duplexes going on in my block right now. They block our streets and they block our alleys. And these heavy cement trucks are coming down right down our alleys. And our alley is a mess thanks to the developers. And if you don't stop this now, don't talk to me about affordability or the citizens. You've got to do something about the bulk plane, and I want it down to 12 feet, and I'm tired of talking about it up here. And if you don't want to do it, then that's up to you. And then you still talk about affordability. And the last city council, you said, oh, let's make ADUs in R1 and put them in R1, put them in R2, but make them short-term rentals. How in the world is that common sense? I mean, tell me, because I thought ADUs were supposed to be affordable for people. Now you're putting them in short-term rentals when you can't even control the STRs that are already here. Makes no sense to me. I just wish people had common sense that represent us. And then I read somewhere in an article that one of you gave to, I believe it was Channel 7, that said, oh, the recalls are going to cost the taxpayer thousands of dollars. Well, let me remind you of something. You have cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars of money. You have increased the density. You have increased our water bills. You have increased our property taxes. You have increased crime. You have increased homelessness. You have increased traffic accidents. And then you chase our businesses off. How does that make sense? The stores I like to shop at, they're gone because you don't make it affordable for them to stay here. Now, I've spoken to some of those employees, and they said they cannot stay here because of the crime. They can't make a profit off the crime. Now, whether that's true or not, that's what I was told. And so I would ask you to really consider, because I have a stack load of these at home. I think everybody that owns a home in R2 has a stack load of these, and I'm tired of them. And if you cannot understand that affordable homes are being scraped in order to put up these duplexes that sell for over $1 million, then somebody's missing something, and I think it's up there, not back here. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Any questions for members of council? Actually, Ms. Brown, I do have a question for you. Who was the developer on that property, or that sent you that flyer?
Buckley team.
The Buckley team?
Right.
And do you happen to have copies of those? Do you mind if I get a copy of that?
I didn't
Okay, no,
bring
that's fine.
copies, but if you want to see it, I'll hand it to you. I don't need it.
No, I appreciate it. I would like to see it.
Okay, but it
Any
does, I just want to tell you, it does say 1 million.
That's actually what I'm curious about, the
139.
fact that they talked
Yeah.
about what they were going to put in its place,
Yeah.
so. Ms. Brown, thank you for your time. Up next is Regan Benson, here to address council regarding malicious prosecution. Good evening, Ms. Benson. If you could state your name and your address or your
Good evening,
cross-reads.
Mayor Sierra and members of City Council. My name is Regan Benson. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening. You don't need my address. It's irrelevant. I want to get right to the point. I do think you have an approachable city manager, Mr. Lewis. And had we been able to resolve this issue, I wouldn't be here tonight on the topic of malicious prosecution. But it appears it is out of Mr. Lewis's authority, since the topic of my malicious prosecution is coming out of your city attorney's office. In my work as the executive director of my own nonprofit, Helping Hands for Dignity Coalition, a recognized 501c3 in the state of Colorado that focuses on direct street outreach with the homeless community, I'm often venturing into the Englewood municipal courts to assist my clients in clearing warrants. I provide transportation for court hearings and assist them in compliance with sentencing conditions imposed by the courts. Englewood is notorious for criminalizing homelessness. In many cases, this freezes my work. It makes it impossible for me to continue to help my clients reach attainable goals. Therefore, first and foremost, in the interest of justice, I provide the resources your city is unwilling to provide by ensuring my clients can, first off, get to court, and secondly, have the appropriate advocate at their side to remind them that they do, in fact, have rights. This is called speech, and far too many in government absolutely despise honest speech. And in too many notable occurrences, government works overtime by abusing its power to silence people it cannot stand to listen to. Englewood knows about this. Englewood has been sued over this very issue of free speech. And again, that's what is occurring here in Englewood through your city attorney's office with a specific employee you just hired last September by the name of Ian Griffin. Ian's taxpayer-supported title and salary is city prosecutor at the rate of $41.90 an hour. That's a cheap attorney. That's a heck of a bargain for the going rates of attorneys. One might be positioned to think you've hired an attorney that's a poor performer in the private sector. It makes me laugh while simultaneously being aggravated because the attorney that I'm having to hire to take on your $42 an hour attorney is worth $500 to $1,000 an hour. Why am I having to do this? Your $42 an hour attorney, city employee, in his official taxpayer-supported position, is accusing me, a private citizen, of the unauthorized practice of law. And apparently here in the city of Englewood, you all have rearranged your city charter and allow your city employees to pursue this type of litigation without any legal advice. It is in fact litigation with a private citizen at the highest level of court in our state. This allegation will be investigated by the Attorney Regulation Council at the Colorado Supreme Court level with the possibility of sanctions. And this is a very serious allegation, and I am, of course, going to hire the very best legal counsel, listen carefully, that will in fact work on my behalf to file claim against the city for allowing these actions. How will my attorney fees initially be paid? By my nonprofit that relies solely on private donations to support the good work that I do. My donors are not happy. My donors are not happy knowing that monetary resources earmarked for direct street outreach now have to be shifted and used for attorney's fees in this insanely ridiculous attempt to silence my speech and derail the very important work that I do. City Council, did you know this was happening? Did you vote to go into executive session on this topic? Did you go into executive session to receive that legal advice on what it means for your city employee, Ian Griffin, representing the city of Englewood, in an attempt to have me sanctioned by the Colorado Supreme Court for the heinous act of free speech? Did you come out of executive session and vote to pursue this type of litigation against me? I don't think you did. But I do intend to continue to use due process through the city clerk's office and open records requests. I will be making a lot of visits to Englewood. I don't enjoy being here. I'm going to be really honest with you. But it's crucial to the important work that I do with my clients. And which, by the way, I want you to know you have an outstanding city clerk staff. They're responsive, professional, thorough. It's appreciated. You know what else is appreciated in your city government? The fact that so far no one in Englewood appears to be as foolish
Ms. Benson,
as
your
city
5 minutes
council
are up.
members in
Ms.
Sheridan.
Benson.
Woohoo!
Any questions from members of council? Thank you, Ms. Benson. Up next is Kimberly Mitchell, an Englewood resident here to address council. Ms. Benson, please, if your 5 minutes are up. Up next is Kimberly Mitchell, an Englewood resident here to address council.
I did get an email that she submitted written. I will get that out to council.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Moving on to the next speaker is C. Dickerson, an Englewood resident here to address council. Good evening, Ms. Dickerson. If you could state your name and your address or cross streets.
C. Dickerson, Bates Logan. In a prior public comment, I pointed out a few of the many decisions you've made that were questionable, both constitutionally and by evidence and results. What I heard back from you has been either complete distortion of what I said or an arrogant assertion, it's just a difference in policy, and a repeat of, we can't hear you when you criticize us. That's just childish and illogical. You as a body do not have a firm constitutional basis for your policies, nor does staff, and especially not the third-party partisan lobbyists you hire. Most every decision council has made regarding many issues has been an abject failure and or unconstitutional. For instance, low-income housing, the biogas project, STRs, ADUs, infrastructure, and giving money to a church. We are hemorrhaging money, taxpayer money, for no purpose, and you're doing it unconstitutionally. Council policy is not law nor ordinance, and regarding public comment, it is unconstitutional. In 2019, 2 members of this current council shut down the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee for 2 months for what one council member, who is now the mayor, claimed without any direct knowledge was a denial of a citizen's right to free speech before that committee, yet now threatens citizens speaking before council with removal by the police when they are causing no problems but just exercising their rights. Public comment needs to be affirmed and not constantly under threat. While there is no state law or city ordinance regarding it, it is constitutionally a right of the people and has been affirmed by council, by ordinance historically, by requiring it of all boards and commissions by ordinance and bylaws. It should not be subject to council policy whims. Tonight, I also want to bring your attention to the state constitutionality of home rule charters and what it means. Home rule charters are built into the Constitution of Colorado to provide a bulwark against the state statutes on purely local matters. When we established our charter and filed it with the Secretary of State, we chose to elect our judge. We chose our own municipal code and are not and should not be subject to state statutes on local matters. We chose to elect our judge versus having him appointed, so we citizens have some voice by election and some way for the judge to act independently of the whims of council or the whims of the city manager and ignorance by both. The only necessary deletion to the charter is undoing Article 32, which is unclear, unenforceable, and unconstitutional. I personally would like to see it added a requirement that city council members and all staff and city employees be required to demonstrate knowledge of the Constitution and public policy from a constitutional standpoint, and preference of employment of people who actually live here. Learn the Constitution and public policy from a constitutional standpoint. Hillsdale College has 2 excellent online courses, Constitution 101 and Public Policy from a Constitutional Standpoint. You all should be taking that because you obviously don't understand the Constitution. Nothing you have said, no argument you have made justifies what you're trying to do by increasing density. You're rubber stamping staff decisions and third-party so-called consultants and gearing everything to developer profits and destroying our charter and muni code control over local matters. Is it not obvious that by changing ordinances to comply with state statute, you need to submit them to a vote of the people to accept state statutes for our muni code or be in violation of the terms in which our home rule charter was established? Yes, you can change the charter by a vote of people, but you are undermining our home rule status and our ability to resist state takeover of constitutionally and traditionally local matters by changing ordinances to comply with state statutes unnecessarily. I will close with saying, if you can't take the heat, you got to get out of your seat.
Members of the public, if you please hold your applause. We want to make sure that everyone has their right to speak during public comment. Ms. Dickerson, thank you for your time tonight. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none, thanks, Ms. Dickerson. And that concludes scheduled public comment. We're now moving on to unscheduled public comment. Looks like we have 5 speakers tonight. First up is Michael Chisholm, here to discuss about road rallies. Good evening, Mr. Chisholm. If you could state your name and your address or your cross streets.
Yes, I'm Michael Chisholm. I live on Cherokee Street. I've been a resident of Englewood for 9 years. And I just wanted to bring an issue to the attention of the council and ask for some action. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'll just read this to you. It's the most concise way. On April 15th and April 22nd, 2023, there were road races on the 3000 block of Cherokee Street. These road races occurred between 10 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. The course of the race was south on Cherokee, west on Hamden, north on Santa Fe, east on Dartmouth, back to Cherokee. Cherokee Street and its intersecting side streets were fully parked with spectator cars. Cars were speeding at least 40 to 50 miles per hour down Cherokee. The noise was incredible, with revving engines and spectators cheering them on. These were big events that disturbed the peace and presented a huge risk to anyone on the sidewalk or crossing the street. Normal vehicle traffic was impossible. My wife, as well as several neighbors, called the police on April 22nd to report these events. Officer Gifford returned my wife's call and explained that the department was aware of these events and that they are all related to a group called Simple SLC that holds these road rallies. They move these rallies around Englewood, making it virtually impossible to predict where they'll be. More importantly, the Englewood Police do not have jurisdiction over such events. Their hands are tied. They need an ordinance that will enable them to respond, stop, and prevent such events. On behalf of the Englewood citizens, we are requesting council to act. We want you to instruct the appropriate city departments to develop the necessary ordinance as described by Officer Gifford for your approval. This is a matter of public safety and the quality of life in Englewood neighborhoods. Please listen to us and respond immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chisholm, for that, for your comments. Any questions from council? Member Newnenkamp?
Mr. Chisholm, thank you for being here and bringing this matter to our attention. Have you experienced this kind of situation in your neighborhood before, the dates you mentioned?
I'm sorry, have I experienced it what?
This situation in your neighborhood in other dates or in the past?
No.
Okay.
2 weeks before these two sessions, there was another one. So they occur randomly. And part of the game is to keep them unpredictable. So about the time your neighborhood steps up and takes notice, they're happening in another neighborhood or another city. And the police responded and did everything they could do, but the way they explained it to us was they have to catch people in the act, and everybody has cell phones and everybody monitors this stuff. So if you're racing and by the time you hit Cherokee, you're told to slow down, you can slow down and go in front of the police cruiser at 25 miles per hour. You can get a block away and take off. I didn't mention this, but there's there's 2 infants on our street and numerous small children, and the parents said the kids can't sleep at night. They're revving their engines. They had food trucks down in front of the dollar store. So these are scheduled events that are happening, and the police know what's going on, but they need the authority to act in a legal, proper way to put a stop to it.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you for coming tonight.
Okay.
Member Russell?
Thank you. This is for the city attorney. Is racing, speeding in the city of Englewood, is it illegal?
Yes, it is.
And so actually, I think we need to do a council request on that. I'll ask for that later. Thank you.
Mr. Chisholm, just a question for me. You stated that there's an ordinance that needs to be changed just because we don't have jurisdiction. Do you know what it is that we need to change in order for the police to?
I'm sorry.
So you're stating that we don't have jurisdiction as part of your comments. What is the ordinance that you're requesting to change?
The policeman said that they don't have the jurisdiction to act, and I'm only interpreting what he said is they need an ordinance that affects the whole event. In other words, to pinpoint a moment of speeding on Cherokee Street is next to impossible. Or to pinpoint a moment of disturbing the peace on Cherokee Street is very hard to enforce. And yet you have this total event. So my only assumption is there are cities and ordinances out there that address this in a collective manner so that the police can act with authority and put a stop to it quickly.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chisholm. Member Woodward has the next question.
Yeah, my only question here right now is, you said the name was Simple, LEC?
Yeah, that's what Officer Gifford knows all about this. So I'm giving you secondhand information. Our police department is well aware of what I'm talking about, and they could give you actually more accurate information than I'm giving to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. Chisholm, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Up next is Gary Kozak here to speak about constitutional rights. Members of the public, if you could please keep your comments to yourself while we're going through public comment. Go ahead, Mr. Kozak.
Yeah, Gary Kozak, 1260 West Oxford. And for your point of constitutional rights, you don't have the right to stop that. They have the right, just like I have the right to say anything in front of this, as long as I'm not projecting and causing a riot or some type of action. You all got one of my papers. This is just a cover sheet. I didn't go into big detail, attorney, okay? This is considered a gathering place, is it not? You've gathered this for a council meeting. Englewood Recreation Center gathers groups for birthday parties. They gather groups for all sorts of things. That's a gathering point. The Senior A Center, the Malley Senior Center is a gathering point. The citizens, not just Englewood citizens, but any citizen has the right to come in and gather and speak their piece. That's a constitutional right. This is a traditional public forum, is it not? This is considered a public forum. And it states right in here, and you got the paper that highlights it, okay? The right to gather petition signatures and fundamental cornerstone of American democracy. The right to free speech throughout the act of petitions. I was informed on a rainy day that I was not allowed in the Englewood Recreation Center. Oh, wait a minute, the city council meeting here, I was allowed to go out there and actually start a petition. Okay, and then I was informed, no, the city made a mistake, that's not legal. Constitutionally, it's legal. And if it's gonna be enforced against me, then I will take my constitutional rights and file a suit. Because it is my constitutional right with anybody that I have out there legally assigned to pass my petitions out has the right to do so, as long as it's not in a privately owned facility. But even at that point, you can argue if it's a publicly forum where they have a gathering place, they have the right. I have the rights here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kozak, for your time. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none, Mr. Kozak, thank you for your time. Up next is Elaine Holtz. With Holtz.
Think the hull of the ship.
Holtz.
Pronounce it correctly.
No topic given. Good evening, Elaine.
333 South Lincoln Street. I haven't been here for about 3 years, but I want to tell you something. Thank you, hon. You might as well start out our Constitution and all the rules that were put down by our forefathers in the city, because that's exactly what you're up to. And I'm sick and tired of seeing people up here who are only there to pad their own pockets for their own itinerary. You're supposed to be representing the people, or do you have meeting after meeting on an issue that they've already told you no until you get them so disgusted that they don't do anything? Well, I got news for you. Englewood has awakened, and we're gonna roar, because you people have been getting away with murder for too long. Like the Depot Park, that property back then, and I was a broker. I've been a broker since I was 27. I'm going to my 90th birthday in a couple of months, and I haven't lost my brain capacity on real estate. Was worth at least $350 for the land alone, and it was sold for $30 to friends. I am seeing little homes that people are trying to start out a family in, or people who are retired don't want to go into a big complex, being destroyed. And you intend to force this through? You know, Thomas Jefferson, and I'm not going to quote him directly because I can't remember it, but he said this in essence: when good people do nothing, evil rises its ugly head. And this is exactly what you're doing in this city. Because we have water rights, you think Denver would love us? You think that Littleton would love us? I am amazed of what you have done here. Look at all this stuff up here. And you people didn't even consider a woman who lost her life in the flood because our infrastructure is wrong. Don't you understand something? Mathematically, when you spend a little here and a little there, it adds up to big dollars. that you don't have for what you really need. And it's about time the people in the city start voting for people by looking at what their performance is and see what they have done. Like, look how much our logo is costing us.
Ms. Holz, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you for your time tonight. Any comments or any questions for Ms. Holz? Thank you for your time tonight, Ms. Holz. Up next is Jan Weipert here to speak about the election, I believe. Good evening, Ms. Weipert. If you could state your name and your address or cross streets.
My name is Jan Weipert. I did email over a attachment today. If you can put that up, I appreciate it. The council should have gotten it.
Ms. Weipert, did you state your address?
Federal and Bellevue.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my time starts now. So I was looking at the numbers for the registered voters versus non-registered voters and how your redistricting was done. I took the population for the 2020 census and I removed from it under 18-year-olds. That left 28,240 people for Englewood that are eligible to be registered. Then I removed the non-citizens and put back in the under 18 because I'd removed the 18-year-olds before. So we came out with Englewood eligible to register population of 27,127. Registered voters on your information says 26,091. That leaves 1,036 people not registered in Englewood. Oh my gosh, let's hurry and go get some names and put them in there. You know what? Englewood at 4.8% not registered. Colorado has 27% not registered. The US has 30% not registered. And just in case I'm really off base on this, I called Littleton today. They have 23% not registered. There's something rotten in Englewood. Now, maybe at the county, it may be here, I don't know, but passing anything for redistricting based on these numbers is not right. There's something wrong. I also want to say, I hope you're here to protect home rule rights, city integrity. You know, as people, we blindly accept what is in front of us a lot of times, but what I'm seeing with the city is that you're accepting what you know. One person was at that town hall from council Saturday, and it was Rita. None of the other 6 of you felt it was important. You all had excuses. Have any of you watched the film to see what the other side of that issue was? You're like lemmings. You go and you fall off the cliff one after the other because you think there's something on the other side of the cliff. But you aren't looking at maybe there's a way to get out of it, or maybe there's a way to look at a different side. You've got to start looking. This is the unconstitutionality. I want my home rule. There's a recall coming, and you guys better be careful. It's coming. I hope we get the 4 of you.
Thank you, Ms. Weipert. Any questions for members of council? Ms. Noonekamp. Ms. Weipert, Member Noonekamp has a question for you.
Ms. Weipert, thank you so much for being here this evening. You mentioned that there was a recording of the town hall on Tuesday. Is that something that you can pass on to us? I was interested in attending.
I wasn't involved in the recording, but I imagine we can get it sent to your email somehow. I think it would be important for you to look at because it did talk about how density and apartments increase crime, and that's one of Englewood's problems that is not being looked at. So yes, you should watch it, and I'm sure it'll get to you.
Thank you. I'd appreciate any materials or video from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Ms. Weipert. Up next is Steve Kelly here to discuss ethics in Englewood. Hello, Mr. Kelly. If you could state your name and your address or cross streets.
Yeah, Steve Kelly, Radcliffe in Delaware. I stand before City Council this evening to express my concern about a member of one of the commissions appointed by the City Council. I would like to file an ethics complaint against the Planning and Zoning Commission member, Brenda Hubka. I believe she also goes by the name Brenda Corrine in social media. In late 2021, when the city closed Jason Park for 4 months and posted the reasons as being overuse and drought, Brenda on social media lied and said that the reason for the closure was because citizens did not obey the signs. This is a false statement and is disparaging to the good citizens that frequent Jason Park. I was shocked and surprised that only 30 days later, Brenda was appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. On social media, Brenda has repeatedly spread lies, slander, and misinformation. She has done this on Nextdoor.com and also on Facebook. Englewood Unleashed has a group there. The interactions which always lead up to her lying, slandering, and being rude has to do with the off-leash privileges. Here are some of the things that she has stated, responding in a public setting. Con man, liar, fool, and the list goes on. The city has standards of citizen behavior. Tier 2, prohibited behavior, abusive, disparaging language, and slurs. I'm going to give the city clerk hard copies of Brenda's social media posts, which show that her language is disparaging, slanders, is abusive, and includes lying. So please review, city council members. The other area of concern has to do with her position acting as an agent for the city in regard to off-leash matters, and her simultaneously functioning as the leader of Englewood Unleashed. This organization is a 401c3 nonprofit corporation registered with the state. Mission statement number 1 of Englewood Unleashed is to, quote, support the off-leash program. Brenda Hubka, in serving as head of Englewood Unleashed, does not support the off-leash, and she controls conversation on Facebook and Englewood Unleashed. Anything that is presented which goes against the city position is deleted or that person is disparaged. Brenda is functioning as a dual agent regarding the off-leash program. In real estate, that's not allowed. In world politics, you call it a double agent. She is working as an agent for 2 different opposing sides. She portrays herself as a leader of Englewood Unleashed. As such, she is obligated to support the mission statement. City Council, you have no power over Facebook or Englewood Unleashed. However, you do have power over membership on commissions. Brenda's lying, slander, and acting as a dual agent should disqualify her on ethical grounds from serving this great city of ours. I urge you to look into the matter and take necessary action to protect the citizens. Brenda violates the city's code of ethics. She also acts as a dual agent. For these reasons, she should be removed.
Mr. Kelly, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. Kelly, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there something? And that now concludes unscheduled public comments. I forgot to mention at the start, but Member Woodward is going to be giving a response to public comment tonight. Member Woodward, when you are ready, you're able to do so.
Thank you. Starting with Ms. Brown's comments, these flyers that are coming around are amazing to me, especially something that's openly advertising buying someone's house and then turning it into a duplex worth over $2 million or $1 million per side. That's disgusting to me. That's what I don't want to do. I know I get numerous postcards, letters, and stuff for the sale of my home that I've lived in a long time and a rental property that I own here, of which I promptly throw in the recycle bin and just figure it's coming. These things come. So I understand what you're talking about there, and I agree with you. Regarding the bulk plane, I think there is going to be some discussions on bulk plane. At least as I recall, in one of the meetings, we were going to take a look at that. So hopefully we will get there. I think I'm going to address some of the free speech from, I think it was Regan Benson and C.N. Dickerson and I think some others that had mentioned it. Parts of this, I'm going to exercise my right to free speech by not addressing it at all. I think Mr. Kozak said something about gathering places and the right to petition, and I believe those things are correct. However, inside a room like this or over at Malley Center, in a room where there are meetings taking place, other than public comment, I think it's inappropriate to be doing that. I think that's my opinion. I don't know if that is constitutionally right. I believe it is. Ms. Holtz, happy to see you here. Happy to see you looking pretty good since the last time I've seen you here.
Tell the truth. I always tell the truth.
Well, we've had our disagreements and confrontations, I think, in the past years ago.
Ms. Holtz, if you could please let Member Woodward respond. Ms. Holtz, please. Go ahead, Member Woodward.
Okay. I will leave it at that. I'm glad to see that you're here. Ms. Weibert, I believe when they're talking for districting, they are registered voters. And I'm going to ask Ms. Carlisle while I'm doing this, registered voters that voted in the latest election. Is that correct? Is that how we do that?
For redistricting, it is the current active voter registration list.
Okay.
And then that's dialed in per district.
Okay. So the 27,000 that you mentioned registered voters in the city of Englewood, that seems awfully high to me.
Ms.
Okay.
Weibert, we're just giving a response here. Member Woodward, if we could just make that a council request to look into just the numbers provided by Arapahoe
Would
County.
you please do that and get it to council and to Ms. Weibert. Mr. Kelly, I don't see Ms. Hutka as a dual agent representing the city. I mean, she represents the city on the Planning and Zoning Committee, but I don't personally have never thought of that as a dual agent because she's also a member or a director or whatever of Englewood Unleashed.
I disagree.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, we're just giving a response. Anything else, Member Woodward?
And Mr. Chisholm, the road rallies, I live in a different part of the city, District 3, which is south of Hampton, and on the east side of Broadway. In the summertime, I hear these rallies going up and down Broadway or Bellevue. I've heard them going up and down Santa Fe. And these aren't just recent things. These are all during last summer and the summer before. When I came back on council, I did bring it up to a meeting that we had with the police department. And as I recall, this was a year and a half ago now, that they answered as it's very hard to enforce that because they're not informed as to when it's going to happen, which is part of the game that's going on here. They wouldn't be informed. And so we hear them. I hear them where I live. I hear them in other parts of the district where I've been at during the evening hours at around 10 o'clock, 10 to 11 o'clock. I don't know what the answer is. If we can do an ordinance, I mean, I know what I'd like to do. It's such a safety issue to me that I'd like to say if you're caught doing that, drag racing, doing whatever, at the speeds that they're going, that their car is impounded. And I've heard of some places where they keep the cars. They lose the cars or vehicles. I don't know if we could do that or if that's even possible, but I understand what you're saying and I agree with you. Something has to be done. And I do believe that is where I'm going to leave it, right there.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Russell, I know that you wanted to add to it.
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I am very concerned about Mr. Chisholm's report. And I do believe we probably need to do a council request and get information on that. I am somewhat hesitant to continue writing more ordinances when we already have ordinances that are not being enforced. And that is very concerning to me. And I think that's all that, I do want to thank you, Mr. Kelly, for that, and thank you for giving the city clerk the information. I do believe it is something that city council ought to look into, and thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you. Anything else from members of council? Seeing none, that completes unscheduled public comment. We're now moving on to consent agenda items. Did anybody need a break, or should we just power through these next items? Anybody need a break, I guess I should ask. All right. We'll move on to consent agenda items. Item number 9, I believe we still want to pull 981. Is that right, Member Russell? Probably good to read.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's correct.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve 9C1?
Move to approve 9C1.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Could I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Can we please vote?
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonan Camp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Member Russell, you do have a question on 9A1. This is the first reading of code adoption for building and fire.
Yes, thank you. I did not see this in the reading, but I just wanted to confirm, and I'll wait a minute till you both get up here. I mean, I was pretty sure that I knew the answer, but I wanted to confirm because I think it's important. Were there any amendments to egress requirements in the multifamily residential eliminating the second stairway requirement?
No, we did not include any amendments to that egress.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think so, but I wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Russell, and just Ms. Montanez and Mr. Smith. I think the discussion that we had last time around is that we obviously wanted to check with Denver Fire and just get a little bit more information on the pros and cons of that. So the expectation was that it wasn't going to be in this in this ordinance tonight. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And with that, any other questions from members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9A1?
I move to approve 9A1.
Thank you, Member Russell. Could I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonan Camp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. There's no public hearing items tonight. We're moving on to 11B1. This is short-term rental regulations. The second reading, we have City Attorney Tamara Niles.
Yes, this was not unanimously adopted on first reading, so it's not on the consent agenda. It is in the same form as adopted on first reading, and I am here to answer any questions you may have.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, City Attorney Niles. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 11B1?
Move to approve 11B1.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Noonan Camp. Any further comments? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Yes, thank you. I will not support this. Again, I object to using ADUs as STRs. It will not make them more affordable, and it will not really be in the best interest of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Woodward.
Like I mentioned at the last meeting on first reading, I object to STRs. And however, since they're in place, I will be voting for these amendments because they're already in place, the STRs. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Anyone else? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonan Camp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward.
Aye.
Member Woodward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 5 ayes and 1 nay, the 1 nay being Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, City Clerk. Moving on to 11C1. This is the 2023 Budget Supplemental Number 2. I'm not sure who exactly is going to be giving.
Mayor, I'm going to just kick it off in Director
Sure.
Lowe's absence by going over the first slide, and then Director Weisky will be doing the presentation.
Perfect. I'll pass it over to you, Deputy City Manager Tim Dodd.
Thank you. And Director Weisky, if you don't mind just pulling up the first slide, that would be great. So Jenny Nolan, the city's budget administrator, is on the call if there are any budget-related questions. So thank you, Jenny, for being here. I just wanted to start, I'm going to go over the first part, which is basically our budget supplemental approval process. And then I'm going to turn it over to Director Weisky to go through the content of this item. So if you can go to the next slide. So I just want to give Director Lowe and Jenny Nolan and Tyson Thornburg in the Finance Department a lot of credit for their work in creating this process. With feedback that we've gotten from staff and from council, Director Lowe and her team have created a pretty streamlined process that also includes an internal form that essentially is hopefully going to help us minimize in the future the number of requests and also make these requests for supplemental budgets ones that have gone through this internal test of being requested, being discussed by the city manager's office, HR if it involves personnel and finance, going through to clarify the requests and determine whether they're needed or whether they can wait. And then if they've been determined internally that they cannot wait, then going forward to council. So I just wanted to show that appreciation to Director Lowe and the finance team for coming up with this. And the request that you're about to hear about is one that went through this process. So I'll turn it over to Director Weisky.
All right, thank you, Deputy City Manager Dodd. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. I'm Sean Weisky, HR Director for the City of Englewood. I'm here tonight to seek approval for a 2% inflationary salary increase for city employees. As you can see, the location of the funds are in the general fund contingency and in a handful of the enterprise funds. We have seen inflation rise 15.3% since January 2021. While during that same period, staff have received total compensation increases of 12.5% for union staff and 11.4% for non-union staff. Included in those numbers is the recent 5% COLA that was just provided in January. Unfortunately, inflation has surpassed all of those recent salary increases, leaving unionized staff with a 2.8% cut in purchasing power, while non-union staff have realized a 3.9% cut in purchasing power. I would like to emphasize that the funding that we're seeking for the 2% increase is already budgeted from the $1.75 million that was set aside in the contingency fund to fund the still pending results of the class and compensation system build. If council approves a 2% increase tonight, the remaining balance in that fund is anticipated to fully fund the class and comp results, so staff will not need to come back in front of council and request more money for the funding of those results. Gallagher, the city's contractor working on the class and comp study, did inform the city that the final deliverables have been delayed. They're anticipated to be provided to the city during the spring or in the early summer. With that delay in the class and comp study, we are proposing to essentially front load a portion of those increases from those existing funds to help provide relief to staff in the immediate term while we await for the final class and comp study results. And with that, I'll take any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weisky, for that. We'll start off with Member Woodward. I believe your light's on first.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Our contractor on this, Gallagher, isn't this a second delay or more?
It is, unfortunately so. Yes, we have experienced a couple of delays with Gallagher so far.
That's real disappointing, in my opinion. as I recall, we were expecting it at year end or the beginning of the year so we could analyze this. Now we're into May, and I'm hearing that we may get it in the spring or possibly what I interpreted this mean late summer or fall. And I'm just wondering what the problem is and why is this so late?
Yeah, they did give us a couple of reasons. The two primary issues that they've run into. The first one is a result of our existing class and comp system that we have right now. Unfortunately, we have a number of jobs that are very unique to the city. Specifically, a great example I like to give is the code enforcement officers also conducting animal control duties. That's something that we do not see anywhere else. And so having to put together a hodgepodge of different jobs and create that analysis with something that actually makes sense and is legally defensible is a difficult process. And they've let us know that it's been difficult to find adequate comparable jobs for some of our jobs. So that's been one of the issues. The other issue that they have been talking, sorry, I'm just going back to my notes because there was a few here that they had. The other issue that they have been talking about is the way that our new structure is going to be structured. So many organizations will look to wanting to be just market competitive or wanting to make sure that they have equal pay for equal work set up within their existing classification structure. We're combining those two. So we are doing a complete overhaul of our current classification system. We are reclassifying every single job in the city, and then we are looking to the market to overlay the market data with those classifications. So it is a very complicated process. Like I said, many organizations do one or the other. Many organizations don't do both, and we are doing both.
Okay. When you say they're having issues with comps, there's 35 metro cities? Mm-hmm. And do they deal or work with other municipalities?
They do. That was one of the reasons that we went with Gallagher in the first place. The other is that we have a 10-year existing relationship with them on our benefits side. Okay. It's not that there are not like other animal control officers or code enforcement officers out there. It's getting both of those job descriptions, synthesizing them, and then coming up with something that actually makes sense as far as putting that job together and what that means in the market. It's not that we can't find comparable jobs, it's that synthesis that's taking a long time.
Okay. And can you tell me, since January 1, 2022, what kind of increases have our employees seen, union and non-union?
So everyone
Total.
Received a 3.5% increase in January 2022, and then just recently, January 2023, everyone got a 5%, whether it was the remaining balance of a 5% from a prior increase that occurred in August, where we gave partial increases to unionized staff, or an entire 5% for non-unionized staff in January.
So that's 8.5%, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to.
Remember, more questions or comment?
I'll leave the comment till later.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Nooncamp.
Thank you for the presentation. Just have a couple of questions. I just want to make sure I'm reading the packet correctly. Are you saying that if we basically kind of front load this 2% now, it will be subtracted from whatever change would come in compensation when we get the class and comp study? Or are you saying this is a new baseline that then that would be added to when that compensation study comes through? Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me make sure I understand. So are you asking if this 2% is being deducted out of the current funding and then whatever that balance is will be left to fund? Or are you saying that the 2% will establish a baseline and then the 1.75 will fund on top of that?
The latter. I'm asking if that is the case, especially if the 2%, is it seen as almost, I'm trying to articulate it well. I apologize. I'm not doing a very good job. Will the 2% create a new baseline that then when the comp and class study comes out, we will start over, or will that 2% be factored in?
Factored in.
Okay, that's the clarity I needed. Thank you. Obviously, I think everyone around the country is experiencing the effects of inflation right now. What if inflation keeps rising? Are we going to come back and do this, regularly? Is that sustainable? How are you thinking about inflation and the impact in the long term?
Right, and so with inflation in the long term, when we implement the class and comp study, we've been working very closely with finance on trying to get a consistent labor budgeting model so that we can make those projections into the future. So we're looking to hopefully create a philosophy and a structure where we can anticipate those increases and we can budget for them appropriately in the future.
And my final question is, if we don't approve this budget supplemental, what impact or what challenges do you perceive us facing?
Yeah, so we are seeing an issue with retention with employees. We did implement an exit interview program. Last year we were able to capture 47 voluntary departures. Out of those 47, 44% of them said they were leaving because of compensation. So we are seeing a retention issue. We knew that we were behind when we started the class and comp project. The increases that we provided, unfortunately, barely kept pace and didn't really keep pace with inflation. So our employees already started behind, and they're still trying to play catch up. And that's the unfortunate reality of it. If it's not approved tonight, this budget is going to eventually be implemented in the future because it's already been allocated for this purpose. So what this is doing is just trying to kind of stem the bleeding, if you will, of those retention issues that we're seeing throughout the city.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
What's our obligation here? Are we obligated in some way by the union contract to make this adjustment, or in the next cycle when the union contract comes forward, would it be included in that?
This would not be part of the union contract. This is really just part of that class and comp pool of money. So it's separate from any contractual obligations that we have with EEA or EPBA.
So we're being asked to do this now because we anticipate that it will be provided as part of the class and comp, and we think that it could stop the bleeding of good staff in the meantime.
Correct. In a nutshell, yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Russell.
So just to make sure, when you shared with Councilmember Woodward that in 2022, they got a 3% raise, and then in 2023, a 5% raise. In the paperwork, it says that they received a total of 12.5 salary increase. Are those the same figures? And 11.4 for non-unionized?
Yes, those are included. So the packet went back to 2021, so that's where those higher numbers are coming in, and we compounded those rates. So it's not 3.5 plus 5, it's 3.5 plus 5% on top of 3.5. So we compounded that to make it as accurate as possible to give you a full picture of what employees have received relative to inflation.
Okay, so and I believe I understand this correctly in Councilmember Noonenkamp's question. So if we approve the 2% now, when the comp and class is determined, that 2% will come out of what they're getting in the comp and class?
Correct, and I probably should have spent more time on this slide. So this $841,000 will be deducted from that $1.75 million that is already allocated for funding the class and comp. Or I should say it's less.
Okay.
$696,000 out of the general fund.
Okay, I understand where we're at right now. I understand why we're where we're at right now, but we are retired government employees. They give you an inflationary raise January 1st. That's it. Doesn't matter what happens to inflation.
Member Russell, do you mind if I stop
Oh,
you there?
I'm
Is
sorry.
there a question?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
I'm done. I will make that comment later.
Thank you, Member
Thank
Russell.
you.
Any further questions from members of council? If not, can I just get a motion on the table? Can I get a motion to approve 11C1?
I'll move 11C1.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Any further comments? Who wants to begin? Member Woodward, I'll let you start.
Okay. You know, I understand market conditions, and I'm pretty much a market guy, you know, so when your wages are lower than others, you tend to lose employees. And it's a supply and demand. I mean, it's that simple. It really is. So I look at, as an example, Social Security. And I figure, okay, Social Security, people that receive Social Security, I'm talking about retirement, I'm not talking about SSI, is typically one or two people. In my case, it's one person. And the millions of us in 2021 received a 5.9% consumer price or COLA increase. In 2022, we received an 8.7% COLA increase. That's 14.6%. That's quite a bit different than the 8.5% that we're talking here. And the employees are working people. Most of them, I will guess, have families, and they have to put up with the increases of the inflation that we've seen over the last 2 years. So therefore, I'm very supportive of the workers of our city. I want to keep them as employees. I don't want you having to spend all your time on hiring employees and looking for it. So I will be voting yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Russell.
Thank you. And what I was going to say is, in the future, I mean, I understand where we're at now and why we're here, but in the future, we need to read into it the inflation, because this money comes out of the budget. And I mean, it really isn't in the budget for 2023. Well, is it in the budget for 2023, but it just hasn't been appropriated yet? Okay, and the comp and class should be done before the end of 2023.
If it's not, there's some serious issues.
Okay, all right. I am in support of this also. I agree totally with Councilmember Woodward, but the only thing, the 5.9% was in 2022 and the 8.7% was in 2023. And I do feel for that demographic of people in this city also. So I will be supporting this. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Russell. Anyone else? Member Noonekamp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting this tonight. Basically, we are doing what we already said we were going to do, what we already budgeted to be able to do. We are doing it in sections instead of all at once. And I just wanted to position this and frame this, that this is not so much a raise if you are already being underpaid in the market. We are still in many ways digging out of a hole to get to market competitiveness for our community. And we all have had examples where we have not been able to complete important infrastructure projects for the city, or those projects have been delayed because we have not had the staff to be able to do them. That hurts the city, it hurts the community. The turnover is incredibly inefficient, and I do want us to do what we can to reduce that. All of that said, I do not like this process. I really don't want to do this again until we get comp in class, and I would like staff to do whatever we can to ensure that that's the next time this happens, because the piecemeal I do not think is effective for decision making, and it's also, I think, just confusing to both the council and the public. So appreciate it.
Understood.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. Anyone else? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Noonekamp?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Moving on to Mayor's Choice. I'll be brief tonight. Actually, one thing I wanted to call out was just, I'm not sure if you guys received these emails from the chamber events, but there's been a lot of ribbon cuttings lately. And so I do want to just thank the work of our executive director, Lindsay, for all the work she's done with this. I noticed that even this week, I think there was one today. Today was Rodeo Dental. Wasn't able to make that ribbon cutting, but I saw that they've just set up shop on South Federal. So I appreciate them making their home here in the city of Englewood. And this coming Friday, we have Katrina Mexican Grill that's open up on the opposite side of the Englewood Grand on the 3400 block of South Broadway. So, but really love to see all these chamber events, love the work that the chamber's been doing, and just wanted to acknowledge all the work that they've done there. So, the second item I wanted to mention is, I think everyone's aware, Celebrate Englewood is this coming Saturday from 10 to 2 here outside the Civic Center, correct? It's here, okay. So I'm gonna try to make it, but just wanted to make the public aware. It was an event that my son loved a couple years back. I hope I could get him back to this event on Saturday, but yeah, check out the fire trucks, check out all the heavy equipment that cleans our streets and you know, obviously, that Public Works puts on display, so I'm really hoping to be at that event. Hope to see some of you all there as well. So with that, I'll move it over to Council Member's Choice. Go ahead, Member Woodward.
I just want to mention Celebrate Englewood. Last year, I was there, and it was the first time, and that's when I mentioned that I was asked why we as City Council didn't have a booth. So this year, I'm going to find the city information booth, and I'm going to be sitting there for a while and take the comments and remarks of citizens that are in the city. And I'd invite anybody else that would want to join me to do the same. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Anyone else with Council Member's Choice tonight? Seeing none, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple of items. Speaking of good news about economic activity, we are hearing reports that Chula's has reopened. They are still working on the building, but I know that many of us, including myself, have been very interested in the progress on that really unfortunate accident that took out the end of their building along Broadway. So we're excited to keep working with them as they wrap up that project. We also received really good news on Friday that we had received notification from the state of Colorado that our PFAS remediation efforts have been funded to the tune of $462,000 and $224. So again, $426,000. This success was really made possible by the just amazing work of our utility staff. I want to specifically thank Lauren Worley, Sarah Stone, Zach Alabassi, and Josh Roach for their work. We also worked with our consultant, Stantec, to put that together. But that's really going to allow us to start a pilot project to begin, looking at best ways to take out PFAS from our water, and I think will really yield long-term results for our residents in terms of ever increasing the quality of our water. Our water is safe to drink per federal guidelines, but the more we can remove PFAS from our water, particularly as the feds, increase those standards for water quality, all the better. I should mention that we were early in testing for PFAS, and we were kind of nervous about that. This grant is a direct result of being early in our testing. We were second in line in the state of Colorado after Thornton, who had tested a little bit before us. So just really appreciate the proactive planning and long-term approach that our utilities department is taking. I also just want to mention, because I mentioned in my email to you about the creation of the Affordable Housing Task Force, that I would be bringing that up tonight. I did get what I think was a really good suggestion from a council member in response that we should put this on an agenda and have a little bit more of a formalized discussion. So we have actually squeezed that onto the agenda. Thank you, Clerk's Office and Deputy City Manager Dodd for getting that on for May 8th. So next week, you'll have a study session item on the Affordable Housing Task Force, but I've really appreciated the comments that we've received so far. We'll be compiling those and giving those back to you as we discuss that next week. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for the city manager?
Mayor, I did forget one thing. We will be working on that council request with regard to road racing, but I was encouraged to get a full report that I have forwarded to council this evening on the issue, and specifically, the fact that we have had a lot of problems for several years with regard to road racing and a group, this SLC group, that has been operating in some parking lots, private parking lots for the most part. We've been pretty successful in talking to them and talking about other options that they may have for other locations. But we are going to continue discussions with them and with property owners who are affected and residents who are affected, and we'll be glad to provide council with more information. But I did send you all an email this evening that was from Division Chief Chad Reed about this issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, city manager. Go ahead, Member Woodward.
A comment for the city manager. I believe Aurora has dealt with this in a big way, and it might be worth reaching out to them and seeing what kind of things they've been able to come up with that may be effective. I mean, that's a really difficult one in my mind.
Thank you for that, Member Woodward, and we'll make sure to do that outreach. Actually, Aurora, Centennial, and Greenwood Village have had, I would say, it's been one of their biggest challenges is the continuation of these races and some fatalities that have occurred as a result. So we will be in touch with them about their response.
Any further questions for the city manager? See none. Everyone, the meeting is adjourned. It is 8:20. Go Nuggets. Everyone have a good night. See you next week.